Glenn Petraitis here for iLuvBBall.com with the head of business operations for the Long Island Nets, Alton Byrd. Alton, this is a slippery slope as far as the balance between the Long Island Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, the fans, the community, and what you guys do. So explain it to me, that dichotomy of how you have to operate.
So we are an affiliate of the Brooklyn Nets. We are part of the BSE Global family of brands. Obviously, BSE Global is in the venue and event business. And so obviously with BSE owning Barclays Center, the Brooklyn Nets, the Coliseum, the Long Island Nets, Webster Hall, and the Brooklyn Paramount, the kind of connection between all of that is sports and entertainment. The fact that we're an affiliate of the Brooklyn Nets, that we've been designed to develop talent both on and off the court. We have been created to build a presence literally here on Long Island, means that there's some real opportunities for growth. You mentioned slippery slope. I like to think that there's a really kind of unique opportunity here to build a new fan base, a professional sports fan base that quite frankly hasn't been on the basketball side here since the 70s. So, I tell people all the time that the Coliseum is the house that the doctor built, and I think anybody who knows the history of the Nets and knows the history of the Coliseum knows that the ABA championships were won here first, and if Julius had never left here, imagine what would have happened if the Nets were still called the New York Nets and playing here.
You mentioned the word development, and I'm mentioning the word community. Mm-hmm. So how do those two things work together for the fan of basketball?
Well, and that's a really good question because, our strategy has been to develop a relationship with local communities here on Long Island. Long Island's a big place. And we are Long Island's basketball team. We're not a Nassau County team. We're not a Suffolk County team. We're Long Island's team. So when we travel, people talk about the Long Island Nets. When you mention us in media, we're the Long Island Nets. And community, our goal has always been to build this team as a community asset, to really focus on education and the importance of education, to really focus on health and wellness, and to have people get healthier and better, to build a relationship with veterans. We know the history of this building. That's why it's called Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. At the end of the day, that's really the purpose of why this team is. It is a community asset and will always be a community asset.
Talk to me about when you have a local tryout, which is extending beyond a draft, kid that maybe slipped through the draft, didn't get there, wasn't seen at the right time, but you have a player on the team that made it through the local draft in Ishmael Shinogo, but through the local tryout. But how important is that for someone like the Long Island Nets?
It's great. I think there are a lot of people who fantasize about their skill sets and their ability to play at this level. And I always forewarn people that, if you show up to an NBA G League tryout, you should expect to see NBA level players. It's great for building a fan base. It's great for fantasy basketball players. It really does give us an opportunity to assess talent that may not have been drafted. Our general manager, Trajan Langdon, and our assistant GM, Matt Riccardi, and our coaching staff do a really good job of putting together an experience like no other. This year we had just under 200 players try out in Brooklyn and on Long Island. So if you're asking, is it worth it? If you were to ask every player that has been through it and ask Ishmael, he would say, absolutely. I have my opportunity because of that. J.J. Moore from Brentwood came through local player tryout and played 2 years with us. So we think it's really valuable. We think it's great for the community, and we think it's great for the basketball player who may have slipped through, and we can catch them at a tryout.
The G League, you just mentioned a few players. The G League is littered. The NBA is littered with G League players. Some teams have more than others. What do the Brooklyn/Long Island Nets aspire to be compared to in the NBA and as it relates to the G League players?
Well, if you think about the successful franchises, and I'm talking about the NBA franchises that have developed G League teams that are very productive, the Spurs, where our GM Sean Marks came from, are really the model. They have developed a really sound relationship between San Antonio and Austin. They've produced a number of players. I think there's probably 7 or 8 players that have played G League basketball on the San Antonio Spurs, and it's been like that for years. It's been a proving ground for players. Santa Cruz, if you look at the Golden State Warriors and their bench, Kevon Looney, Quinn Cook, most of those guys have played in the G League. They've probably got 4 or 5 players. So I think those 2 franchises have been very successful. I think Sioux Falls has been successful with the Miami Heat. They've produced some good players from the G League to the NBA. Maine and the Boston Celtics, if you look at their franchise, another good one. So I think we aspire to be a Brooklyn Nets real asset that they can send players to, that we can develop players, that we can draft players to, that they'll get the same experience as they would if they were playing in Brooklyn.
So how does that translate to the players? How do you explain that to the players, that you're that close, and look at all the ones that preceded you?
Well, sometimes you don't have to explain it to the players because they can see it. Last year our head coach Ron Norred, if you're talking about develop, 27 years old, now he's on Charlotte Hornets bench. Yogi Ferrell literally was with us for a quarter of the season, and now he's in Sacramento, having played the last 2 years with Dallas. That's how close players are. They come here, they develop, they get creative. And we spend a lot of time not only developing them on the court, but off the court, because that's as important as what they do on the court. Yes, you got to be able to put the ball in the basket, but the country and the world is littered with players who aren't in the league for a reason that has nothing to do with their skills. It's life skills. And we're very lucky that we don't have to convince players. We show them here may be the right way to get there, and we have a real solid platform to do it.
You're not only developing players, like you just mentioned, last year's coach on the Charlotte Hornets. Guys are just like players littered throughout the league as far as other positions, probably people of your stature within the organization. Everyone's training that's working with the Long Island Nets to get to that NBA level.
Absolutely. We've had staff that have moved on and become successful. We've got people who, and again, we're developing talent for BSE Global. At the end of the day, if we have a staff member, a team member, an account executive, a sponsorship salesperson that can really do it here, there's always the opportunity for them to move, and to move to Brooklyn, if that's where they want to be. I think at the end of the day, the word develop is really truly what we are as a franchise. But I also think, over time, we're developing relationships with fans. We're developing relationships with sponsors. We develop relationships with our partners in the building, AEG and Levy, on food and beverage. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to continue to help people in their personal lives create new outcomes, create better outcomes, and to encourage them, to inform, to educate, and inspire folks.
Speaking of new outcomes, the NCAA and the NBA and G League kind of got together and figured out a way to maybe eliminate the one-and-done player for that special 18-year-old high school player. What's your opinion on it? Does it help the league? Does it hurt the league? Does it help college basketball? Does it hurt college basketball? Overall,
and I'm an old dude, so I would say I think it helps everybody. I think it gives the unique high school player an opportunity that he normally wouldn't have. I think it helps the league create a better relationship with high school players. And again, people have to make sure they understand this is for guys that are elite players. There will be a group of folks that the G League designates to make that selection. It's not something you take lightly. And I think, again, holding the context to develop, holding that contextual word develop, I don't think there's any downside to it. I think it's going to take one or two people to try it and see how it works. And I always say, you're asking an 18-year-old to play with grown men. The funny thing is, in Europe, the Luka Doncic's and those kind of players who are now 18, 19 have been playing with grown men since they were 15. So this is no new phenomena. The Europeans have been doing it for years, and I played in Europe for long enough to see that evolve. So I think it's good for everybody, and I think when people calm down and realize that it's a unique opportunity, I think the league will be happy. I think players will be happy. I think the NBA will be happy.
And I hope people come down and realize what the Long Island Nets are doing for this community, and people like us at iLuvBBall.com and Alton Byrd. We appreciate your time, and thank you for your honesty.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and we look forward to seeing all the Long Island folks come on out. We put on a pretty good show, and it's really good family entertainment, and the basketball's pretty good too.
For iLuvBBall.com, I'm Glenn Petraitis.